This week, the National Eucharistic Congress of the Catholic Church in the United States was held in Indianapolis. It has been a resounding success. More than 50,000 people have packed the stadium in which this event was held. It has been a huge success in every way. It was even a great success that in this meeting was prepared in all dioceses of the country in an exemplary, admirable way, and that an initiative that had never been carried out, possibly in any other part of the world, was proposed. Perpetual pilgrims, men and women, most of them young, who have traveled from different parts of this immense country that is the United States, have traveled more than 10,000 kilometers carrying the Blessed Sacrament and passing, obviously not through all the parishes in the country. Some were designed routes that converge on Indianapolis, but wherever they passed they aroused extraordinary enthusiasm. They went through certain parishes carrying the Blessed Sacrament. There they were accompanied and welcomed by the local Catholics who joined this wave of enthusiasm. A resounding success and a great initiative by the North American Catholic bishops. Why? Because after the COVID epidemic, the number of Catholics attending Mass dropped by a significant percentage, perhaps not as much as in other places, and the debate was created about whether one could take communion in any situation. For example, those who lived in a marriage or irregular relationship, or politicians who were supporting abortion laws. Faced with this, of course, the North American bishops decided to once again proclaim the doctrine of the Church in its entirety and faithfully, but they also realized that it was necessary to take the Lord out into the streets, for the faithful to see Christ again, to recognize in the Eucharist the real presence of the Lord. And of course, also teaching that one could only take communion when one was in grace, and that it was necessary to go to Mass on Sunday, to go in person, except for those who could not do so because they were sick, for example. I repeat, a resounding success has greatly revived the love of the Eucharist throughout the country and has reminded us of the essential principles of our faith in this regard. Christ is alive in the Eucharist. He is waiting for us in the tabernacle. You have to go to Mass on Sunday if you do not want to commit a mortal sin, and to take communion, you have to be in grace of God. At the same time, data from the Catholic Church in Germany was known a few days ago. Again, a massive apostasy. More than 400,000 have left the Church in the year 2023, in the year that has just ended, which has already passed. In Germany, and in very few other places in the world, Austria, and a small part of France. In Germany, membership of the Church is linked to the payment of a tax, an extra tax, the religious tax. He who does not pay is automatically considered an apostate. If you do not pay, you're out of the Church. But if you're outside of the Church, you cannot take communion, and you do not even have the right, for example, to request a funeral. That's what the German liberals are like. Money is money, and he who does not pay out. He who does not pay is an apostate, and absolutely no rights are recognized, and it is stated as such. This man voluntarily abandoned the Church simply because he has not paid his tax. Well, in this German Democratic Church, that those who do not pay are expelled. In this church, between 400,000 and 500,000 parishioners are lost each year. A marketing expert, one of the great German experts, Veit Etzold, has written an article and published it in Focus magazine. He analyzes the situation from his perspective as a professional in marketing and sales, and says, any company in the world that loses 500,000 customers every year would have automatically fired, and several times too, his management team. And it would have changed not only the team, but the methodology for approaching its clients. I mean, this is a catastrophe from a marketing point of view. From a marketing point of view, It is a catastrophe. Any company would have fired that leadership team and said, "What policy are you pursuing? We're going to do just the opposite." Instead, he adds, the German bishops, and the very powerful lay people of the Central Committee of German Catholics have been saying, says Dr. Veit. They have been saying this for 20 years. He says, one thing that is a lie and that is false. His thesis is, people leave because we have not adapted enough to the world. We have to adapt more to the world. And he says, this is false. This is a lie. They are speaking, he says, to an audience that does not exist. They are transforming the masses into acts that satisfy, or seek to satisfy, the ideology, he says. Red-green. That is how he uses that phrase. Red-green. Well, possibly, he could have said the dominant ideology, the gender ideology, the red-green ideology. These people, they address despite the church. These are the words of his marketing technician. They despise the church. They will never go to Mass. It is not that they are not going, it is that they will never go. But on the other hand, it disappoints, frustrates, and disgusts the Catholics who do go to Mass, who are the ones who will leave. They are trying to attract a public that despises them and that will never go no matter how much they make discounts. On the other hand, they are expelling from the church those who feel disappointed and defrauded by a church that adapts to the world. A church that adapts to the world is a church that has betrayed Jesus Christ. Have you forgotten that Jesus said, "You are in the world without being of the world"? Two opposite models of the church. One, the Catholic Church in the United States puts Jesus on the streets. It puts Jesus next to its faithful. And there is also a strong ideology that is contrary to religion, contrary to the church. There are also priests, bishops, and many cardinals who want a submission to the world, but the majority does not do it. The majority of bishops do not do it. Almost all of the young priests are conservative, and what they have decided is the opposite of what Germany is doing. Demonstrate that they want to serve one Lord, and that although they are in the world, they are not there to serve the world. The Germans, on the other hand, I don't know if they're convinced or not. After 20 years of failures, a normal person would have realized that what they are doing is useless. So they will know. But this marketing guy says that any company would have fired them long time ago and several times. And they insist. We must submit to the church, the world. A world that despises them while Catholics feel disappointed and leave 500,000 a year at that rate. It is to be taken into account. We should not be surprised because Jesus clearly said that if the salt becomes tasteless, it was no good other than to throw it on the ground and to be trampled on by men. This world that the Germans want to serve despises them, steps on them. They are not going to go to church because they realize that in reality they are only seeking to serve them in something that they already have and that does not interest them. Serve them by offering them a discounted morality, a watered-down dogma, and that is something, I insist, that they already have, and that no one has to give it to them because they have plenty of it. Two models of the church. One with a future, with its difficulties, but with a future. The Catholic Church in the US that openly proclaims that Christ is their Lord, that they believe that Christ is God, and that they want to worship Him as He deserves and serve Him by complying to the norms that the Church itself teaches, and asking for forgiveness when it does not. The other church, a church that surrenders to the world, that insists on surrender and adaptation, that is doomed to failure, because in the end, that world ends up trampling on it and despising it. Until next week, God willing.